Okay, so this is lesson 5-8, dividing with 2 decimal numbers. So in this lesson, you'll have divisors with a decimal and dividends with a decimal. Whereas in the last couple lessons, you only had either the divisor with a decimal or the dividend with a decimal. Now you have both. So it will look something like this, where you have 6/100ths divided by 2/10ths. So first, let's remember that the first value in a division sentence like this is the dividend. You're writing this down right now. You're labeling this equation with me. And the second value, what you're dividing by, is the divisor. You're writing this down right now. You're writing the exact same thing as me. So now I can't solve it like this. I need to put it into one of 2 formats. I could use a division box like I have here. Remember, we don't know what that's called. We looked it up. It's just called a division bracket. Or I can make it a fraction. So let's do both just to see what it would look like. No one caught me. Dividend. Not dividend. It's a D. Okay, so the dividend, you know, goes inside your division bracket. So that would be 0 and 6/100ths divided by 0 and 2/10ths. It would look that way. So the dividend goes inside and the divisor is outside, right? Yes, Mrs. Shock. Okay, or you could write it as a fraction. And in that case, the dividend is on top. It's the numerator. And the divisor, is the bottom, or the denominator. So you have all of this on your paper before I move on to the next slide, or you're pausing right now and you're writing it down. So let's look at how we would solve this if it were within the division bracket. Okay? So we'll do this one together, and then I will give you the exact steps. So you're going to go along with me writing it down, and then I'll give you the exact steps, and you can write those down after. Okay? So here's what I have. I have 6/100ths divided by 2/10ths. Now, remember, we talked about how you can't have a decimal in your divisor, because we know that in division, really the whole premise of division is that we're taking a value and we're breaking it into groups. We're taking a value and we're breaking it into groups. Except we can't break something into 2/10ths groups. Can't do that. So I have to make it into groups. In order to do that, I have to get the decimal out of the divisor. So I need to get my divisor's decimal over to here. And to do that, since I moved one place value, I'm multiplying by 10. Well, if I do it here, I have to do it over here as well. I don't want that spot there. I have to also do it with my dividend. Remember, we talked about the cranky fractions. The numerator says, I want some too. So the same thing's true with the dividend. So I have to also multiply that by 10, which will move my decimal point over one place. No, bad Mrs. Shock. That will move my digits over one place. Bad Mrs. Shock. My class had to correct me on that today. So now I'm going to rewrite it just to make my life easier. So now I have a 2 as my divisor, and I have 6/10ths as my dividend. Everything just moved over one place. Okay. Now I'm ready to divide because I don't have a digit's not the word. Decimal in my divisor. So I'm going to ask myself, hey, self, how many times does 2 go into 0? Well, self, it goes into 0 0 times. Well, how many times does 2 go into 6? 2 goes into 6 3 times. Oh, big mistake, forgot my decimal. 3 times 2 is... I subtract, I'm donezo. So here's my answer. Okay? So that's how I did it. Now let's look at the steps. Make sure you write this all down. You have all of this on your paper because it's magic math that I've given you. You have to have it on your paper, all of it. Okay? Here are the steps. The first thing I did was I set up the problem. So I set myself up by drawing the problem. Nope. That's the first thing I did. Step 2, I multiplied both numbers by a power of 10. In this case, it was just 10 because I needed to only move over one place value. Okay? So that's what we did there. Now, I rewrote mine after that. Okay? You can choose to rewrite the problem, use a caret or an arrow to show where the decimal belongs. And then step 4, which I inadvertently never put on this thing, here it is. Step 4, divide or solve. So that was step 4. So pause now. Write down the steps. So I could also look at it as a fraction. Remember we talked about how the dividend would be on top, it would be the numerator, and the divisor would be the denominator. So I rewrote it, and I'm going to multiply it by a version of 1 so that I can get this decimal out of here, because I don't want it. I know that I can multiply it by anything as long as the numerator and the denominator are the same, because that's the same as multiplying by 1. The identity property tells us we can do that. So since I need to move over one place value, I'm only multiplying by 10. If I have 0 and 6/100 times 10, that's going to move me over one place value. And then if I have 2/10 multiplied by 10, that's going to move me over one place value. So now all I have to do is divide that. And I know, just because I know my math facts, I know 2 and 6 work really well together, that it's 2 times 3 equals 6. No, it's not 6 though. It's 6/10. So it's 2 times 3/10 equals 6/10. So my answer is 3/10. Okay, write that down. Here come the steps. First step, we wrote it as fraction. We know the dividend goes on top. I think I'm saying it a lot because it's important and you have to know it. I keep repeating it because it's important. Then I multiply by a version of 1. In this case, it was 10 over 10 because I needed the divisor to move over one place value. So everybody moved over one place value. And lastly, I divided and solved. And I found out that my answer was 3. Pause and write them down. Let's do practice. I want to do this one as a fraction. Putting the dividend on top. Divisor on the bottom. I have to multiply by a version of 1. How many places do I need to move this decimal? 1, 2. That tells me that fraction is going to have 100s, 2 place values. So this will be 420 because I moved my decimal over 2 places because it's 100. And this will be 7. I feel like I'm always making my divisor a whole number, and that's easy to remember. So now I can divide. How many times will 7 fit into 420? Well, it'll fit into 42 6 times, and then there's that 0. So our answer is 60. Write it down. Okay, let's do this one. This one we'll do with a division bracket. Miss Johnson, which one goes inside?
The dividend.
Which one's the dividend?
I think the dividend will be 2.4.
I think you're so right. 2 and 4/10 inside. 8/10 outside. I'm looking at it. I need it to get out of there. So that's going to be times 10 because it's one place value. This guy says, I want 10 too. So I'm multiplying by 10 there as well. So now I'm going to rewrite it because make it easier for me. Ooh, lucky me, I ended up with 2 whole numbers. Shabam. How many times does 8 go into 2? None. How many times does 8 go into 24? 3.
Can we also do it
done.
so that we don't have to go into 2?
We could. We don't even have to do that at all. We could just say, I know that 2 is less than my divisor. 2 is less than 8. So I'm just going to ignore it and look at my 2-digit number. 8 goes into 24 3 times. And I know that that has to be in the tens place, not above the 2, because I lined it up on paper that you just can't see right now. Magic. The end. Okay, I have 2 practice problems for you. Here they are. Which one's the dividend? This one. Which one will go inside the bracket? This one. Which one would be on top of the fraction? This one. See you tomorrow. Miss you already.